Good evening, and welcome to the December episode of Northwest City Politics. I'm your guest host, Eric Margolis. Today we'll be traveling to Golden Valley, where we'll be getting a preview of the upcoming Legislative House session for 2026. We're joined by former Golden Valley Council member and current Representative Mike Freiberg. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Eric. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So, hard to believe, 2025 is gone, and soon it'll be time to go to the Capitol again in 2026. But I think most people don't realize you actually spend a lot of time at the Capitol, even while you're not in session.
A fair amount. Definitely spend a lot more time when I am in session, but there's always meetings that come up with, sometimes constituents like to meet at the Capitol. I try to meet them in the district whenever possible, but sometimes you have to meet with staff members, with stakeholders if you're working on a piece of legislation. There's just things that come up. Sometimes school groups want to meet with legislators, so you'll head over there to meet them for then. So yeah, there's certainly plenty of opportunities to go over there even when we're not in session.
And recently there's been a lot of activity, especially in the months following the violence that we experienced, you've experienced, that we lost our good friend Melissa Hortman, Speaker Emeritus, and her husband Mark. And that has probably reshaped how you feel about representing the people of Minnesota in that role and being in that sort of public place, and also maybe some of the priorities of what we need to do in our state to combat this type of violence.
Yeah, it was June 14th was a tragic day for the state, for me personally. I lost a friend, colleague, and mentor in Speaker Emerita Hortman. She was just always a great supporter of mine, a great friend, one of the most consequential legislators Minnesota's ever known. We passed so many things under her leadership that it's just a huge loss to the state that we're still feeling. Having had Senator Hoffman and his wife Yvette attempted assassination there. I just saw I saw them both actually at an event last week, and they both seem to be doing really well, which is just incredible and so good to see that they're doing well. And it was just such a traumatic summer for so many people. I found out after the fact that my name and my wife's name was on one of the assassins' hit lists. So, it's just the toxic nature of our politics right now, I think, is partly to blame. The easy access to just so many firearms, and honestly that, with the Annunciation school shooting at the end of the summer too, it was just a terrible summer all around, and really speaks to the need, I think, for us as legislators to pass some gun violence prevention measures, and hopefully we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, and there were some recent developments, even today. There was an executive order signed by the governor, and I know that you had recently held like a town hall on gun violence prevention as well. What I understand from that executive order, there'll be sort of a committee that'll be.
Yeah, I haven't read the executive order yet. I certainly plan to soon, so I don't know everything that's in there, but I do know there is this committee that'll be set up. So I'm hopeful there'll be some meaningful action that comes out of that. I do think what we really need to do is at the legislative level, though, because we know gun violence prevention measures work. During this 23-24 session, we passed universal background checks. We passed the extreme risk protection order law. There was an article that came out in the Star Tribune about the red flag law, as it's known, showing that it involved 300 or so people, I think, already in the program, and it potentially prevented violent actions from happening either against the person who owned the firearm or to somebody else that they knew in those situations. So we know these measures work. We know we need to do it. Unfortunately, and the thing that seems to be generating the most attention right now is an assault weapon ban and a ban on the sale of high capacity magazines. There were negotiations happening for a special session potentially on those topics. Unfortunately, it didn't come to pass. It's become kind of a partisan issue, which unfortunately I don't think it should be, but that's just kind of the nature of the legislature. It is a partisan institution. So the special session didn't come through, but I know just certainly the Democrats in the legislature, me personally, are going to keep fighting for common sense gun violence prevention measures.
Yeah, and one of the most interesting things about this debate on the other side of the aisle were people who, unlike myself, believe that reform is needed, that there should be these limits, that we should have these bans. You always hear them say, they're coming for my guns. They're always talking about the amendments, the Second Amendment. But you never hear them talk about any of the other amendments, right? Sure. That is an interesting thing to me and I think what is really super frustrating, I think, as a citizen of Minnesota and of the United States currently, is the level of misinformation that passes as actual fact these days. Mm-hmm. We see that in our discourse in a lot of places, and it's very difficult to move past that. When we go back and we think about what happened to the Hortmans, how someone appeared at their residence pretending to be part of law enforcement. And we see today our neighbors and our fellow citizens being dragged off in unmarked vehicles by masked people who we're not even sure if they are law enforcement. How do you, from your view, from your position, how do you tell and what do you say to people who wake up every morning and are fearful of being, abducted or taken away or ending up in a mass shooting or, losing a loved one to a mass shooting? What words do we need to say? What conversations do we need to have, and how do we, support the work that you're doing at the legislature?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We are in very troubled times right now, and I think as legislators, we need to be there for members of our community who are immigrants. These are our neighbors. These people, they work in our community. They're paying taxes. Many of the people who are getting detained are citizens, as it turns out. So the more we can do just to show up for those communities, show that we support them. Just as a legislator, I've been, some of the rhetoric coming out of the White House is appalling. Calling an entire community garbage. So after that happened, I made sure, I was at press conferences just in support of my Somali colleagues. I've done a rapid response training for if they do come to our community. I mean, there have been kind of isolated, smaller incidents in our part of the Northwest Metro. So some of my colleagues have been to larger scale operations, like in Chanhassen at the airport, South Minneapolis, places like that. So there are groups forming of neighbors, rapid response groups, signal chat groups, just that people are keeping each other in the loop. There's a whole process to follow. We don't want to stand in the way of legal action. We don't want to obstruct anything, but just I think to the extent we can show up to support our neighbors, to require that all legal processes are followed. If they're coming into an apartment building, making sure they have a judicial warrant, and the unmarked. You kind of talked about the unmarked, the unidentifiable nature of many of the people participating in these actions too, and that is really troubling. I mean, I was woken up on June 14th by a call from the Golden Valley, the acting police chief in Golden Valley, telling me what had happened to my colleague, Speaker Emerita Hortman, and just telling me, we're going to have a squad at your house in 5 or 10 minutes. If anybody in the meantime rings your doorbell, don't answer the door, even if they say they're with the police. Right. Call 911 to confirm that they are in fact police, and that was just very troubling to me. And one of the other things we're considering, as part of our gun violence prevention measure, is increased penalties for anyone who does impersonate a police officer. Another thing I think we can do as a legislature is, California passed a law prohibiting law enforcement agencies from being masked and unidentified and unidentifiable, because not only do you not know who they are, there's a risk that people could be impersonating them and kidnapping people, frankly. Correct. So it's all very troubling what's happening right now. I think there's legislation we can enact. And I also think it's really important that we show up for members of our community who are feeling under threat right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a controller-in-chief. We don't have, at the highest level in our government, in our president, the current occupant, the way that he talks about our citizens, our fellow neighbors, and our immigrants. Our country is founded on that. it's just very disheartening. And it makes, I think, people feel very powerless. And I can't even imagine what it's like to actually be the target, because I don't look like a person who is Somali. I don't fit the profile. Perhaps maybe I won't be stopped. I won't be asked for my papers. I won't get caught up in all of that. And it makes it very difficult to wake up every day and to look forward to anything. But we look to you and to our representatives to help us find that thing. And and I think elections are a very big part of that. And we're going to have some elections that are going to be very consequential. We're going to be going into an election year. You've served on election committees and have done work to try to improve the quality of elections. And a lot of people are fearful that what we're seeing today is going to spill into the polls. So my question for you is, what are we going to do? What is the state going to do? What is the legislature going to do to continue to ensure the integrity of our elections in Minnesota? And what makes elections in Minnesota so uniquely different than anywhere else in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, we have very accessible elections in Minnesota, and we have very secure and safe elections in Minnesota. So I've been honored to chair or co-chair the elections committee in the House for the last 3 years. I mean, in 2023-24 session, we passed some of the most consequential election reform legislation there was, automatic voter registration, pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. We restored the vote to people who are in our communities on probation. We passed the Minnesota Voting Rights Act, the National Popular Vote, Interstate Compact. So just lots of administrative improvements as well, requested by the Secretary of State's office. So, we consistently have the highest voter turnout in Minnesota around the country, among many different populations, young people, older people, just the state as a whole, which is really great. And actually, this past municipal election just a month ago, so I've been to some conferences for election chairs of both parties around the country, and one thing a few of them told me, again, members of both parties, is that a great opportunity as chair of an election committee is to be an election judge. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, well, I've never actually done that before. I should give that a shot. And so just this past municipal election, I actually went to Minneapolis and I was an election judge there, and was just really impressed with the caliber of the chief election judge and the other volunteers who were at the location where I was, all the safeguards that are in place to ensure nothing happens. There's everything gets counted and recounted again, just to make sure there's no extra ballots. Anytime anyone needs assistance marking a ballot, you have to have a election judge from both parties to helping them, just to make sure there's no undue influence or anything like that. So we have a really safe, a really secure system in Minnesota. The people who volunteer as election judges do great work, and it was just kind of an honor to be a part of that process this year too.
Yeah, it's really great to be part of the process as an election judge, and there's always an opportunity because there's never enough of them, and so that's really great. And I think it's going to be very important for people to make sure they educate themselves on their ability to vote, and that they should vote, and that they should show up at the polls, because there's a lot at stake for who we want to be and who we're going to be. Okay, so on a more positive note, right? What are the things that you are most looking forward to when you return to the legislature for the next session? Now, I think it's not a budgetary year, right? And so you get to maybe do more policy. Is that correct?
Yeah, so historically, the even year session, which we're going into in 2026, is the bonding year. So the big work, in the odd year session, it's longer. There's more work to pass the state budget, which we're constitutionally required to do, and we did last year. So there's really nothing that's constitutionally required to be passed, but typically in an even year, the legislature will pass a bonding bill that'll fund infrastructure projects around the state. So my hope is, and those are constitutionally required also to have a supermajority vote. So unless one party has a huge majority, it's going to require bipartisan support to pass a bonding year most years. And we definitely do not have one party with a supermajority right now because we have a tied House.
Right.
There's 67 Democrats, or 67 Republicans, and we expect after a couple special elections, actually there's a primary today.
Right. Two of them. We expect there will be 67 Democrats as well. That's what we had during the previous session.
So for any bill, not just a bonding bill right now, but for any bill to pass, it needs to have bipartisan support. So typically you would work more on policy in the even year sessions. Sometimes though the even year sessions tend to get dominated by either state level or national politics, and I certainly think with a contested governor's race, a U.S. Senate race, I think there'll be kind of the Speaker of the House herself is running for governor now too. So certainly expect it'll be a politicized session somewhat. I mean, I'm hopeful we can do some work. I certainly would like to see, as I mentioned, work on gun violence prevention.
Right.
Just given the tied nature of the House, I think it could be a heavy lift for it to actually something to get enacted into law, but I'll certainly keep fighting for it. I'd like to see some help for our schools.
Yeah.
I just in the Robbinsdale district where I live, my daughter's at Armstrong High School. I'm the Quiz Bowl coach there. The school board is facing these budget problems.
Down 3 schools.
Right? Yeah. I was at the public hearing both last week and last night, and I just heard very impassioned testimony from people, who don't want their schools closed, their kids' schools closed. So it's just, it's just a heartbreaking decision, kind of for everybody involved. The board is in a really difficult position. So I do think, and it's not just the Robbinsdale district, but other districts are facing that too. I know, the Hopkins district, which I also represent a chunk of, is facing some budget problems. So I just think at the state level we need to do more to help out our schools. How much we'll be able to do given the tied House, given a politicized session, I don't know, but that's certainly something I think we need to work on as well.
A lot of the good work that was done that you mentioned earlier under Speaker Emeritus Hortman, those social programs that help people, that help Minnesota families, it feels like a lot of that might be at risk given the tide at the national level in terms of funding that may be relied upon to make those programs, because they're not solely 100% funded by the state, correct? There's also federal funding that goes into those programs.
Yeah, what happens at the federal level definitely affects us as well. I think there are things we can do to help offset some of the damage that's being done at the federal level right now. Healthcare access is a huge issue, and people are going to see, with the new year, people are going to see higher health insurance rates. The cuts to Medicaid are going to be a huge drain on state and county, budgets, I think, generally speaking. So, I do think there are things we can do at the state level. There's a bill out there to create a new 5th-tier income tax to help fund some of the cuts to Medicaid that are happening at the federal level. But honestly, just as a state, we don't have the resources to address everything that's being done at the federal level. So we're going to have to think about it pretty closely. And also, again, with the tied House, it's going to be challenging, I think, this year. But hopefully, if we're not able to get major reforms done to help offset some of the things that are happening at the federal level this year, there'll be a favorable election and we'll be able to get more done in 2027.
Right, so again, it all goes back to showing up at the polls and making sure that we continue to move these progressive issues and values, the things that Minnesotans depend on, and the services that our friends and neighbors and family members depend on. Unfortunately, trying to make up for the potential deficit that, as a state, we might face because our funding may be cut for one reason or another, depending on the current administration's temper or feeling of where we're headed or their assessment of who we are. I don't envy you in that work, right? But I also know that this is your 7th term in the House, right? And you actually will not be seeking re-election to the House.
Yeah. So I'm thank you to Senator Rest for all the work she's done in our community. I think she's justifiably very well regarded as an expert on tax issues. I think the child tax credit that we passed was a testament to her work there. But she did announce that she's not seeking re-election. So I have decided to run for, and I have been running for the state Senate for our district. So it's been a great 7 terms, 6.5 terms, I suppose, at this point in the House, and I look forward to my last year there. I love the House. It's a great institution, but just after some of the events of the summer, losing a friend and a colleague, and just seeing what's the damage that's being done at the federal level, the more I thought about it, in the past, people would ask me, like, would you ever run for a higher office if Senator Rest didn't run again? Would you run for the state Senate? And at the time, I would say, in previous years, I would say no, and I meant it. I'm chairing a committee in the House and been there a while, but I don't know. Just the more I thought about it, the more I felt like it's just important to step up. I feel like I could make a difference there as well. And you represent twice as many people. You probably carry more bills because there's fewer senators. It just seems like a good opportunity, and seems like the time is right. And I want to continue to serve this community. And I'm excited to I used to represent a larger chunk of Crystal and one precinct in New Hope, so I'm familiar with those communities as well. And I've been outdoor knocking in like northern New Hope in the portion that I haven't represented previously, and it's been great getting to know some new people up there. It's a great community, and so I just decided to throw my hat into the ring for the state Senate, and I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Fascinating. Well, I mean, so for the viewers at home and, for people tuning in, and what are some of the things that you could accomplish as a senator, the state Senate versus a House representative? Like, how is the dynamics of here's civics lesson 101, right? So. Yeah,
well, I mean, they're similar in some ways. I mean, like for any bill to become law, it has to have a House version and a Senate version, and they have to be identical when they, ultimately pass both the chambers and then get signed by the governor. So, I'm sure I would continue to work on some similar issues that I've worked on. I've chaired the elections committee the last few years. I've worked on local government issues, having served on the city council. When I'm not at the legislature, I work in public health, so I've carried several different pieces of legislation related to public health policy. Mm-hmm. So I would expect to continue to be active in those areas, but I mean, you never know. You could end up learning, there might be a need for somebody to learn about a new issue, and I've always enjoyed kind of, as a House member, I've always enjoyed trying to be involved in different legislative areas. I mean, some legislators get very involved in a specific issue, whether it's like healthcare policy or labor policy or something. I feel like I've done that somewhat in like the health area, in the elections area, but I've also tried to carry bills in other areas too, just to kind of keep my toes in different areas, and so I think it's just important to know what's happening in different areas. So I've carried bills in consumer protection or education policy for, over the years. I'd expect to continue to kind of have a wide variety of interests, but I'm sure, based on the committee assignments I might end up with, if I do get elected to the Senate, I might narrow my focus a little bit into those areas also.
And so, seeking that position, you probably have been spending time in other parts of the district, right? So it's Senate District 43 that you are running for the Senate seat, mm-hmm. and you're probably talking to people more. What are you hearing today out there in terms of what Minnesotans, besides the issues that we've talked about up to this point in our discussion, what are some of the key, sort of bread and butter, dinner table discussion issues that are that you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the issues we've talked about are, there's a reason we talked about them.
Right,
because those are the issues I think a lot of people care about. Certainly in our community, I think just with some of the school closings that are being discussed, I think a lot of people care deeply about our schools and making sure they're strong. People are worried about their health care costs in our community, and throughout Minnesota, people are worried about their neighbors getting taken away by masked and unidentified people. So it's just, it seems like there's just kind of an upsurge in interest generally in what the government's doing and what it should be doing and what it could be doing right now compared to some previous years where I've run. And I think that's gonna be reflected in the amount of people who turn out to precinct caucuses on February 3rd and who come out to vote. Yeah, and
it's for all parties and everywhere in the state.
Yeah, and not just. Obviously, I'm a little focused on the DFL precinct caucuses, but if you're a Republican, they are having precinct caucuses. And actually, in our district, they're both happening in the same building. They're both happening at Sandberg Middle School. So the Republicans and the Democrats will be sharing a space there. I know that's happened in years past and has been cordial, and so I expect that'll happen again this time too. But that's where people should go on February 3rd. It does seem like people are plugged in and connected this year in a way that maybe not every year they might be, just because there's just so many things are happening, and there's just so much chaos at the federal level, and I think people are motivated to be civically involved this year in a way that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot at stake. I encourage people, like we always do, to participate in the process. And if you don't know what precinct caucuses are, you can call Representative Freiberg. He'll tell you all about them, and you can also find information with your own party's website, or even the Minnesota Secretary of State's website as well. It is important to participate. And then in your particular case, there's an endorsement process that takes place, correct?
Yeah, so at precinct caucuses on February 3rd, they'll select delegates to the conventions. I think it happens similarly on the Republican side, but on the Democratic side, the DFL Senate District Convention's happening March 21st. That's where they'll do the endorsements for state Senate and then also for the 2 state representative seats, which are also open this year. So it's going to be an exciting DFL convention, I think, too. I'm sure the Republican convention will be exciting as well, but I've never been to one of those.
A lot of change in 43. They're opening up your House seat, Senator Rest's retirement. We also know that your colleague on the other side of the district is also not running for re-election.
Yep, Representative Cedric Frazier has done a great job as the representative for District 43A. He is running for county attorney, so his seat is open. I know there's a few people running for his seat. There's a couple people running for the seat that I currently hold, and then I'm running for state senate also. Right. So it's a lot of change in our district after having had a lot of stability over the last several decades. Actually,
23 years I think you've been representing the people combined in your city council and also in the House, right?
Yeah,
it's a long time.
It is. It's hard to believe. I was a young elected official once, and now I have a gray beard.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're all getting old, which is not bad. It's good to be on this side of the grass.
Yeah, that's right.
So our time is basically almost up. Any closing thoughts that you want to share with the viewers at home before we wrap this up?
Sure. Well, it's been an honor to be the representative for this district for 13 years at this point. I feel like I've had a good record and excited at the prospect of potentially taking that to the state senate. We'll see what happens. Certainly nobody's entitled to a seat or anything, so I'm working really hard to earn support from people in the district. It is just a tumultuous time in Minnesota and in the country, so I know a lot of people are worried about what's happening, but I am encouraged just at the amount of civic involvement I see, whether it's people protesting on the pedestrian bridge near my house over Highway 100, or showing up to our town hall meetings on gun violence prevention, or just emailing me expressing their concerns, or showing up to protect their neighbors who are at risk for being taken by masked ICE agents. So there's just a lot of involvement around the state, around the metro area, and here in our district right now, which I find really encouraging, and I'm just hopeful. I'm hopeful that things will get better, just because I think people are are really taking what's happening seriously right now.
Yeah. Well, we're really grateful that you found some time to come and chat with us today on our last show of the year. It's been a great 22nd season, 22 years I think we've been doing this show. And we're looking forward to 2026. As always, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to look out for each other and be well. Good night.